So the president is 100% committed that we will provide whatever tools we need, that the economy will be in very good shape a year from now. This is not like the financial crisis where we don't know the end in sight. This is about providing proper tools and liquidity to get through the next few months.
During yesterday's White House coronavirus briefing, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, he tried to calm fears about a global recession. Markets remain in turmoil. Yesterday, stocks fell about 7%, triggering a temporary trading pause in an attempt to stop the plunge.
That stock market drop was attributed to coronavirus concerns and also the worst one-day crash in crude oil prices in nearly 30 years. Here to talk about coronavirus's possible impact to our economy and global market anxieties is Kevin Cirilli. He is the Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg TV and Radio, and also a Hill alum.
Yes,
right.
Welcome back.
Home.
And friend of the show.
Glad to have you.
Congratulations on all of your success in the book
Kevin.
and everything.
Well,
Very
same to
much
you.
appreciate that.
Same to you. Great to have you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with some of the political piece of this. We just heard a little bit from the press conference yesterday. What is the expectation in terms of what the administration is going to ask for in terms of a stimulus and whether Democrats are going to play along?
Economic stimulus. I mean, that's case in point number one. And you have to be able to divorce the politics from the policy here for a second, because over the past 2 years, we're in the middle, regardless of who the occupant in the White House is, of the largest economic expansion really in modern history since the 2008 recession. So this is cyclical to some extent. And there's been brewing economic turmoil for quite some time around the world. So the coronavirus came in and it really caught folks off guard. And it's really had a staggering impact on economic confidence, on consumer confidence. And with folks having to cancel events, South by Southwest, for example, Coachella. This is millions of dollars worth of economic growth that has since been studied. So President Trump is coming in and he's saying that he wants to be able to work with Democrats on things like paid sick leave, like having some type of stimulus. He had $8.3 billion the other week, but that's only a fraction of what happens in a natural disaster. Hurricane Sandy was something like $20+ billion.
Wow.
So we haven't even seen the extent to what's coming. You guys mentioned the oil market as well. That it was a 1-2 punch because you've got Russia and the Saudis dabbling now in the oil markets, and that has significant domestic political implications in Michigan, Ohio, southwestern Pennsylvania. And so, this is, as one Trump source put it to me within the last 24 hours, a perfect storm. And they're really scrambling right now to try to calm the markets, but calm voters as well.
So, Kevin, yesterday the president at that press conference talked about, having a payroll tax cut. I think the president's going to have a press conference at some point today about economic stimulus. I mean, what do the markets look like right now in terms of the futures? I think some of the gains were erased. So it's not all, yesterday's headlines were terrible, but today there seems to be some limited recovery.
Well, it's been a roller coaster.
Okay.
I mean, and you know this. I mean, to have the circuit breakers. I mean, we in the media, we've got the stop the press button.
Right.
You run and you see the guy. That's what they have on Wall Street, and they never really have to use it. So for them, 4 minutes into trading, to have to do the circuit breaker, to just give everyone, take a deep breath.
Right.
I mean, that's remarkable. It was the worst day in trading since 2008. So there is a lot of economic fear. I spoke with 2 top economists yesterday on the street, as they call it.
Yeah.
And what they said was, look, if there is a recession, it's not going to be as bad as 2008. And so you're going to see in the next...
And why do they have that confidence? I'm just...
No, it's a fair question.
Before 2008, they were like, everything's fine. And then it wasn't.
Precisely. Because they feel that now, with stress tests in place, with other... if you look at the economic fundamentals just around the world, that they're able to contain this. You heard this from the World Health Organization yesterday, where they said this is the first type of massive virus that has spread that's actually been somewhat containable. And, I'm thinking to myself, how... can't even shake hands with each other, but it's more containable than in previous. But also, just in terms of the triggers that are set for the oil markets as well. But I've got my eye on Russia and the Saudis because that has to play out, and that's divorced from the coronavirus.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, that's the economies of Texas, Pennsylvania, Michigan, any place with fracking. I mean, it's the cascading effects of that on job markets are massive. As a Texan, I know that the oil price is everything whenever it comes to our job
And this is the first time that America has been a net exporter of oil, of energy. And so that's that's playing into this as well.
Right, but of course our costs much higher than the Saudis, which is why they have such a power position here. Kevin, what about, there's been some industries are obviously going to be decimated in terms of coronavirus, right? You think about airlines, you certainly think about cruises, like who would go on a cruise right now,
the gig
right?
economy.
And so is there an expectation that there could be bailouts for some of those industries? Is that being discussed right now?
Senator Elizabeth Warren, who tweeted just within the last 2 days, this shouldn't be a financial grab bag for big business. There are going to be conversations in terms of one person's stimulus is another person's bailout. And so as it relates to the energy sector, as it relates to how you're going to get people to be able to recover, I can tell you I spoke with Senator Mark Warner just within the last few days. He's the top Democrat on intelligence, a prominent member of the banking committee. And he's been in conversations with banks and financial institutions. Remember, we're just around the corner from tax season.
Right.
We're just around the corner. If you have to stay home from work or you're self-quarantined or you're in a situation, Crystal, where you've got to work from home and you're not able to pay your bills on time, not because of any fault of your own, but just because of the process, banks need regulatory forbearance, it's called, where you've got to have the Federal Reserve, other regulators saying, okay, we understand that you're going to have to provide more leeway to consumers who are impacted by this and who are slowed down by this. That costs money, and that makes banks nervous. So that's from the consumer perspective.
Right.
Then you start talking about oil, you start talking about fracking. Will banks want to lend to these companies that potentially could have to file for bankruptcy?
Well, and will these companies be able to pay their debt service? Precisely.
And so that's where this, I think, could have, that's why we're talking about the dreaded R word.
I think that's part of the problem here is that in 2008 or even in some of these other Wall Street crashes, it's generally separated from actual economic production. But in this case, it's like with the crude market plus the real economic damage of, when the market starts to drop and liquidity and all the credit and that stuff starts to drop, that's when people start to feel it at home.
Right. Well, and you see it with your own eyes.
Exactly.
If you walk out, I was in the airport, it was empty.
It was, and Trader Joe's.
Right. It's like there's no money going into the system, and that just inherently starts to skew it.
Can I ask you guys a question? Because I think you guys have the best, your finger on the pulse of populism, really better than anyone. What would happen as we said, one person's economic stimulus is another person's bailout. I mean, from your vantage point, as you guys talk to folks, is there an appetite at all for there to be some type of help for the energy sector?
No. Zero. I mean, it would be a complete outrage,
especially on finance. I think that's
and bipartisan too.
Yeah, I think the only sectors where people are going to be willing to do for anything consumable, airlines. It didn't do anything wrong, but it's like on the financial companies and stuff like that. It would be very difficult politically.
I have a different read. I don't even think for the airlines. People freaking hate these airlines.
They do,
and especially given the continued bad blood. Like we all remember what happened last time when Wall Street got bailed out. They're all richer than ever, and regular homeowners who had all of their basically life savings tied up in their houses were screwed and got next to no assistance. So I don't think there'd be an appetite for bailout.
And to that point, that's where the political implications are really, really going to be felt. You've got the baby boomer generation, which lost everything in the 2008 crash, which are now having to work even longer in their life because of 2008, now at risk for losing even more in their savings. You've got the political ramifications of key battleground states as it's tied up in the oil sector and the energy market. And then you have this millennial who are once again trying to get to the next phase of their life, pushing 40, and can they, because of now another slowdown?
And this affects interest rates as well when it comes to student debt.
And they can only go so low.
Well, and Kevin, that's part of why I question that this recession could be limited, because you have people with a lot of personal debt right now. I mean, there's a massive personal debt, auto loan debt, all of which resembles the housing debt that was the problem before the 2008 crisis.
I'll never forget when it was actually, I believe it was Senator Elizabeth Warren, but don't hold me to that name, when Fed Chair Janet Yellen was going through her testimony to be confirmed to the Fed chair. She was before Jay Powell. And she was asked precisely about whether or not the student debt crisis mirrored at all the housing debt crisis and the mortgage crisis of 2008. And she said it didn't. And here I was, I'm like, I don't have an MBA. Yeah. I don't have an economics degree. But I was sitting there and I just thought, well, play this forward. I mean, if people can't pay off their student loans and then they go and they have to punt the decision to be a homeowner or punt the decision to start the next phase of their life. I mean, that could have impacts. I think we're going to find out this year.
Yeah, well, you're
dramatic,
just
cascading economics.
That's right, and you're just in a position where people are already against the wall, where their already credit cards are loaded up, where they're already making big auto payments that are a struggle for them, where they already have those student loan debt payments that are a struggle for them. So there's no wiggle room, right? We know the numbers around how many Americans have $400 for an emergency. It's not good.
Yeah, certainly not.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Hey, it's great to be home. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
You'll be back. Tonight, there are 125 delegates at stake in the Michigan primary. Might as well be Bernie Sanders' last chance at slowing Biden's delegate lead. Next on Rising, Hill reporter Jonathan Easley, who joins us to talk about the campaign's efforts in that state.